Let's get into percent. So, before we get into the math of percent, I would like to take a moment and just talk about the definition of percent. And when I talk about the definition of percent, I don't mean in math terms. Okay. So, we have our word percent. Okay. Well, this word has some Latin roots and it's broken into two pieces, per and cent. Okay. So when we talk about the term per, okay, this right here, the definition of this is for each or for every. Okay. So let's think about some other things that use per. So, like, we might talk about miles per hour. Okay. So when we think about that word per, that means how many miles we travel for each or for every hour of time. So then we look at cent. Okay. So let's look at some other places that cent shows up. So when we think about cent, we can think about money, right? So think about how many cents are in a dollar. Or perhaps we can think about years in a century. Or, and we will see this when we get to chapter 2, centimeters. Okay, so there's that prefix again, in a meter. Okay. And each one of these, if you're playing along at home, cents in a dollar, years in a century, centimeters in a meter, all of these are 100. So the word percent literally means for each 100. Okay. So when we can look at that, let's say that something is 85%. Okay. So we can say 85%, percent, 85 for each 100, 85 per 100, or you notice how this representation 0.85, this is 85 hundredths, and it also looks a lot like money. It looks like 85 cents. Okay. So this is where we get into, like, how would we change? Um, we want to kind of change different forms into percent. Okay. So we have, we want 0.75 and we want to change that. So change to percent. Okay. Well, if you think about this, okay, 0.75 is also 75 if we use place value words. 75 hundredths, which is also 75 hundredths, or 75%. Okay? So the neat thing here is that if you notice, 100 has two decimal points, or I'm sorry, two zeros, which means that we are going to move the decimal two places. Okay? So when we start, so here are the rules. If we start with a decimal number, or a whole number, which is also a decimal number, okay? You move your decimal point two places right. In other words, multiply by 100. Okay? So, some examples. So, we're going to change to percent. Okay? So, let's say that we have let's make it 7.8. Okay? We're going to change this to percent. So, that means 7.8, take the decimal point right here and move it two places. 1, 2, and let it land. Now, because you see we've got this nice open space right here, well, we have to fill that in with a 0. Okay? Which means that 7.8 is the same as 780%. Okay? Now let's say that we are starting with the percent. Okay? So for this one, we are going to start with the percent. Okay? So we are going to move the decimal point two places left. Or in other words, divide by 100. Okay? So our example here. So we're going to change the percent to a decimal number. All right. So let's change 5.6% to just a number. Okay. Well, you have your 5.6%. All right. We're going to take this decimal and move it 1, 2 to the left. And again, we have this open space, so we have to put this 0 in here. And when we move the decimal, the percent symbol goes away. Okay? So that means that 5.6% is equal to 0.056. Okay? So that is the big those are the big things that we need to deal with percents. As far as just changing them, there is one more thing that we can look at just really quickly here, and that is if we start with a fraction. Okay? So, when we start with a fraction, step number 1 is going to be to convert the fraction to a decimal by dividing our numerator by the denominator. Okay? And then we want to continue with the start with decimal steps. Okay? So, here is our example for this one. Change 1/8 to a percent. Okay? So, when we are beginning with this, all right, the first thing that you are going to do, and you can either do this by hand or you can do it in your calculator, okay, is you are going to say 1 divided by 8. Or if we were putting this like with the division house, the 1, that first number, goes under the division house, okay? And the way we know that this is correct, if you think about it, 1 out of 8, is that going to be bigger or smaller than 1 whole? Well, if we had 1 pizza and it was cut into 8 slices and you ate 1 slice, you ate a lot less than 1 whole pizza. You only ate 1 slice, okay? So, in your calculator, 1 divided by 8, and that gives us 0.125. Okay? And in order to change this to a percent, remember, we're going to take this decimal point and move it 1, 2 places, okay? Which gives us 12.5%. All right. As always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. I am here to help in any way I can.